Picture this. 9 knights walk into Jerusalem in 1119, claiming they want to protect pilgrims on dusty roads. But instead of patrolling those roads, they disappear beneath the Temple Mount and start digging. For nearly a decade, they excavate in secret, searching for something the world wasn't supposed to find. When they emerge, they're no longer poor knights. They've become the most powerful organization in medieval Europe, wielding influence that makes kings tremble and popes nervous. But what exactly did they uncover in those ancient tunnels? What if I told you the Knights Templar weren't just warrior monks protecting the Holy Land? What if their true mission was far more dangerous, involving a secret the Church itself was meant to guard? And what if, in their quest for hidden knowledge, they accidentally broke something that was never meant to be broken? You've heard fragments of this story before. Mysterious excavations, sudden wealth, accusations of heresy. But tonight, we're going deeper than the surface legends. We're exploring the possibility that the Templars discovered something beneath Solomon's temple that fundamentally changed the balance of power between heaven and earth. Something that may have unleashed consequences we're still feeling today. This isn't just another conspiracy theory about hidden treasures or lost artifacts. This is about a seal, a divine barrier that certain scholars believe was placed there for humanity's protection. And if the evidence is correct, the Knights Templar may have been the ones who broke it. So settle in, because we're about to journey into the shadows of the 12th century, where faith and power collided in ways that still echo through our modern world. This story begins not with swords or battles, but with silence and the slow scrape of metal against ancient stone. The year is 1119, and Jerusalem is a powder keg. The First Crusade has ended, leaving behind a fragile Christian kingdom surrounded by hostile territory. Pilgrims flood the roads to visit holy sites, but many never make it home. Bandits lurk in every mountain pass, and the journey from the coast to Jerusalem has become a death sentence for the unprepared. Into this chaos step 9 French knights, led by a man named Hugh de Payens. They approach King Baldwin II of Jerusalem with a simple request. Let us protect the pilgrims. Give us a place to establish our headquarters, and we'll make the roads safe. The king, perhaps relieved to have someone else handle this dangerous responsibility, grants them permission to set up their base in the most sacred location in the city, the Temple Mount. But here's where the story takes its first strange turn. Historical records from this period are frustratingly sparse, but what we do know raises uncomfortable questions. These 9 knights, who claimed their mission was protecting pilgrims on the roads, seem to have spent very little time actually protecting pilgrims on roads. Instead, they established themselves in the ruins of Solomon's temple and began what can only be described as an archaeological expedition. For nearly 9 years, they dug, not openly, not with fanfare, but quietly, systematically, like men searching for something specific. The few contemporary accounts that mention them during this period describe sounds echoing from beneath the temple complex. Scraping, digging, the movement of heavy stones. Local workers reported seeing the knights emerging from underground passages covered in dust and debris, carrying tools more suited for excavation than warfare. What were they looking for? The official story, written centuries later by Templar chroniclers, claims they were simply fortifying their position and creating living quarters. But this explanation crumbles under scrutiny. 9 men don't need nearly a decade to dig out some sleeping chambers. And if defense was their goal, why focus their efforts underground rather than on the visible fortifications that would actually protect against siege? The answer may lie in what the Temple Mount represented to medieval Christians. This wasn't just any piece of real estate. According to biblical tradition, this was the site of Solomon's temple, the dwelling place of God on earth. It was here that the Ark of the Covenant once rested, here that the Holy of Holies contained the very presence of the divine. For devout Christians of the 12th century, every stone in this place hummed with sacred energy. But there were other traditions, darker ones, whispered in the margins of religious texts. Traditions that spoke of things sealed away beneath the temple for good reason. The Book of Enoch, though not included in the biblical canon, was still widely read in medieval monasteries. It told of fallen angels, forbidden knowledge, and divine seals placed over dangerous secrets. Some versions of these texts specifically mentioned the Temple Mount as a place where certain things had been bound, locked away from human interference. The Templars would have known these stories. They were not ignorant peasants with swords. Many came from noble families with access to the finest libraries in Europe. They would have studied not just military tactics, but theology, history, and the esoteric traditions that surrounded the Holy Land. If anyone would have known what to look for beneath the Temple Mount, it would have been them. And then, around 1128, everything changed. The 9 knights, who had spent nearly a decade in relative obscurity, suddenly burst onto the European stage with a force that defied explanation. They returned to France not as failed adventurers, but as the founders of what would become the most powerful military and financial organization in Christendom. Their transformation was nothing short of miraculous. These men, who had started as minor nobles with modest resources, now commanded the attention of kings and popes. They received papal recognition from Pope Honorius II, who granted them unprecedented privileges. They were answerable to no earthly authority except the Pope himself. They could recruit members, build fortifications, and collect donations throughout Christian Europe. But perhaps, most telling of all, was their sudden, inexplicable wealth. Within decades of their return from Jerusalem, the Templars had established a financial network that stretched across Europe and the Mediterranean. They built massive fortifications, funded entire military campaigns, and became the bankers to royalty. Their wealth seemed to appear from nowhere, as if they had discovered some secret source of funding that required no explanation. Where did this money come from? The traditional explanation points to donations from pious nobles eager to support the holy cause. But the scale of Templar wealth suggests something far beyond normal charitable giving. They weren't just rich, they were impossibly, mysteriously rich in a way that made even their contemporaries suspicious. Some historians have suggested they discovered a physical treasure beneath the Temple Mount. Gold, silver, precious artifacts left behind from Solomon's time. But others point to evidence of something far more valuable than mere coins or jewels. They may have found knowledge, secrets that gave them power over earthly rulers and heavenly authorities alike. The evidence for this interpretation lies not in what the Templars said, but in what they never said. For an organization that claimed divine mandate and papal blessing, they were remarkably secretive about their activities. Their initiation ceremonies were conducted in absolute privacy. Their financial records were encrypted. Even their architectural choices seemed designed to hide rather than reveal. And their architectural choices revealed something even more disturbing. When you examine Templar constructions across Europe, a pattern emerges that has nothing to do with military defense and everything to do with containing something. Their chapels weren't built like normal churches. They featured unusual floor plans, circular designs that mirrored the layout of Solomon's temple, and most unnervingly, sealed chambers beneath the main structures. Take Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, built by Templar descendants long after the order's official dissolution. The entire building reads like a 3-dimensional codebook, filled with symbols that don't belong in a Christian chapel. Pagan imagery, astronomical alignments, and most disturbing of all, carvings that seem to depict things that shouldn't exist in medieval Scotland. Corn and aloe plants, species unknown in Europe until after Columbus, yet somehow carved into stone decades before the New World was discovered. But it's the basement of Rosslyn that truly unsettles researchers. Sealed vaults that ground-penetrating radar confirms exist, yet no excavation has ever been permitted. The official explanation cites structural concerns, but those who've studied the chapel's construction know it was built to last millennia. What lies beneath those stones that requires such careful protection? The answer may be found in the Templars' own records, the few that survived their systematic destruction in 1307. Hidden in coded language and religious metaphor, these documents speak repeatedly of a burden, a responsibility that weighed heavily on the order's leadership. They refer to themselves not as guardians of the Holy Land, but as guardians of something far more abstract and terrifying. They called it the seal. This wasn't some physical object they could lock in a vault. According to their encrypted correspondence, the seal was a barrier, a divine protection that kept certain forces separated from our world. And if their fragmented records are to be believed, their excavation beneath the Temple Mount had damaged it beyond repair. The evidence for this catastrophic breach appears in the most unexpected places. Church records from the late 12th century, just after the Templars' return from Jerusalem, show a dramatic increase in reports of supernatural disturbances across Europe. Unexplained phenomena that had been rare during the early medieval period suddenly became commonplace. Accounts of demonic possession multiplied. Strange lights appeared in the sky. Crops failed in patterns that defied natural explanation. The Church's response was swift and telling. Rather than dismiss these reports as superstition, they launched what amounted to a supernatural investigation network. The Inquisition, traditionally viewed as a tool for hunting heretics, devoted significant resources to documenting and containing what they termed preternatural manifestations. Their records, sealed in Vatican archives for centuries, paint a picture of a world suddenly vulnerable to forces that had previously been held at bay. And at the center of it all were the Knights Templar, growing ever more powerful and secretive. Their behavior during this period suggests they knew exactly what they had unleashed. Their expansion wasn't random conquest. They systematically established strongholds at locations throughout Europe that corresponded to ancient sacred sites, as if they were trying to create a new network of containment. Their banking system, revolutionary for its time, may have served a purpose beyond mere profit. By controlling the flow of money throughout Christendom, they could influence where resources went, which expeditions received funding, and most importantly, which archaeological sites remained undisturbed. They weren't just accumulating wealth, they were buying silence, but their greatest secret may have been their recruitment practices. The Templars didn't accept just anyone into their ranks. They sought out men with specific bloodlines, particular knowledge, or connection to what they termed the old wisdom. Their initiation ceremonies, conducted in absolute secrecy, weren't just about swearing oaths of loyalty. They were about preparing new members for a truth so dangerous that knowing it changed a person forever. Those who underwent these initiations emerged different. Contemporary accounts describe Templar Knights as men who had seen too much, who carried themselves with the weight of terrible knowledge. They spoke in riddles about their true purpose, referring to themselves as guardians of a threshold that must never be crossed again. The Church, initially their greatest supporter, began to grow suspicious. Pope Innocent III, who had granted the Templars many of their privileges, started asking uncomfortable questions about their activities. His letters, preserved in Vatican archives, show growing concern about reports reaching Rome. The Templars were conducting rituals that bore no resemblance to Christian worship. They possessed artifacts that church scholars couldn't identify. And most disturbing of all, they seemed to know things about the nature of reality that even the highest church authorities found unsettling. So here we stand, centuries later, still grappling with the echoes of what 9 knights may have unleashed beneath that sacred mount. Did they break a divine seal that was meant to protect humanity from forces beyond our understanding? The evidence whispers yes, but the truth remains buried beneath layers of secrecy, encrypted records, and sealed vaults. Perhaps some mysteries are meant to stay hidden, or perhaps the real question isn't whether they broke the seal, but whether we're ready to face what's been seeping through the cracks ever since. What do you think lies beneath Rosslyn Chapel? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story has opened your eyes to the hidden currents of history, subscribe for more investigations into the secrets they don't want you to discover.